Sort of, yeah.
Who did that for you? You ever know? I don't know if you're sensitive to music being out of tune, but it drives me fucking nuts.
Well, relatively sensitive. I certainly can tell. Yeah, I'm pretty good at tuning a guitar. I always was. Yeah, but I wouldn't say it's missing a string. And I think the lower, should be the E. I can't remember what it is out of tune. But anyways, who cares about that? Who cares about that shit? We must get down.
It's fun to talk about shit. I mean, we spend our lives talking about serious shit. Why can't we talk about fun shit once in a while?
Exactly. You sound really quiet. Hold on, it might be my volume on here.
Does this application have a StreamYard have a control? I don't see it anywhere.
I don't know. It's probably okay. You just sound quiet, but it's probably nothing. There's also a windstorm here.
I can talk really sexy and close to the microphone if you'd like.
Very seductive. You always start the shows with a bit of flirtatious talk. That's hello, beautiful talk.
I have a friend. His name is Max. I haven't talked to him in a long time, but he's Russian, and when he talks to it, he has deep Russian voice anyway, right? And he smokes, which makes it more gravelly.
Yeah.
So when he talks to his wife, it sounds very much like he's having sex with her in his ear. You know.
Nice. Yes. So you were enjoying some strippers and having some beers, I heard.
Well, I mean,
right before the show.
You called, you sent me the message, and I said, well, I better get rid of the band, the strippers, and the beer bottles, and clean up if we're going to do something respectable like record. But then again, I say that to everyone, and nobody ever believes me about the band, the strippers, and the beer bottles.
Yeah, but how excellent would that be while you're ranting about triangles and crazy shit to have some strippers in the background, and actually like laying down, fundamentals of life.
Well, I lived on Sahaydashnago in Kiev, right, which is it's like this old Stalin era building, and I had the corner. I mean, a great second floor corner, fantastic. Downstairs was a restaurant whose name escapes me right now, but it's the name of a common Ukrainian food, and they had two floors.
What? Well, no, that's Russian. Pierogies.
I won't think of it. It won't come to me because I've tried to think of it. And then, like 3 doors down was a strip club underground, and then 3 doors down and across the street from that was another one. So, like, if you had the guys over, I mean, there was like an endless supply of of act like ass clowns available to us.
Yeah. So you're saying the Soviet Stalin era building was nice?
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Was it?
I mean, absolutely gorgeous. 10-foot, 11-foot ceilings. Windows from your waist height up to a foot from the top. Great light. Instead of this cheap, they try to make our buildings narrow to keep down on the cost, but you're talking about 24-foot wide by 36-foot long rooms.
Really?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have associated that with the communist stuff. I mean, I've never seen the interiors. I've seen the outer sort of brutalist looking buildings.
Yeah, that's later. That's later. That's
okay.
Khrushchev. So all those beautiful buildings in downtown Moscow and Kiev that are grand, and they were going on at the same time we were having our what's that movement here associated with
like Art Deco? It's that
Deco movement, correct?
Yeah.
The reason we got the brutalism stuff was post-war because the post-war allowed us to invent panel products, and so that's why architecture has gone to shit. Is because pre-war construction is built with hand products and steel, and post-war construction is brought with panel products, and too often stick in panel product construction, which is it's just
it's definitely part of it. Yeah, but I mean, I don't think they wouldn't even try to do even with their panels, they wouldn't try to do a high ceiling kind of vast open giant room space. They had a design sense then that was superior, I would say, as well. That sounds like it reminds me of an apartment in Vienna I stayed in. And it was just like, I was staying in this apartment, but it was like amazing spiral stair. Like it was crazy. It was like vast spiral stair. It looked like it was super thin, made out of just like concrete or cement or something. I have no idea what was actually holding it up. And the ceilings in your apartment was like double the height of a regular ceiling
Mhm.
easily. And it's just like nowadays, you just say, oh, what a loss of space. You could have another apartment up there. But no,
Well, I
there's
mean,
nothing like
before
a
you
high
have
ceiling.
electric lights, you need the daylight.
That's
And
true.
so they built high ceilings so they can have large windows.
Yeah.
So, but I just appreciate the absolute mass of the building, right? So
Right.
they're quiet, right? They're quiet. Anyway, so the main room is basically 24, 25 by 36 with a kitchen, then dining, then this enormous living room with all this glass, and then there was through an archway there was a bedroom which really normally you'd use as an office or something, and then another bedroom, then a couple of baths, and I just found it to be an ideal living space. I don't know what it's going. It's worth millions now.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's crazy.
you don't, I'm not sure. Are you trying not to say where you live? Do you live in Ukraine still? Or should I not ask
No,
where you live?
I'm in the States. I've been in the States.
Oh,
I came back to raise another round of funding. Well, two reasons. First, three reasons. We were running out of money in the business. I'd had pneumonia for a year and couldn't get rid of it with the healthcare in Ukraine, and to raise another round of funding. So I figured I'd be back in 4 months. But what happened, of course, is my health didn't get better; it got worse. And then I discovered my mother was fibbing about her condition, and so she needed a
right. I
full-time
remember you
care.
saying, yeah. And you stayed with her while she passed away.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so, which was really harmful for me, but I feel really good about having done it, even though it was really harmful. But I sort of talked to her about it. I said, "Look, um, the technology to build my product it's not there yet, which and it will be, right. We could see it happening. It's almost there now. It
Yeah.
probably is there now. Um, the and so the amount of work we had to do to build the product then, and the amount of work we'd have to build a maintainable product today is different. We can actually build the AI today, and we couldn't build it back then.
Mm,
So what I did is I just switched off on my intellectual project, right? Well,
yeah.
which I could do while taking care of my mother,
Yeah.
and I just delayed the tech product, and I'm just about done with the intellectual product. So it's
Mm,
about time to switch back to the tech product, and moreover, the market's ready for it. Like I knew back in the mid 2000s what the next generation platform would look like, because it was really obvious because Microsoft was failing so hard. But uh, you know, the problem is that the technology's got to be able to do it in the browser today,
right.
and we
So,
use
okay.
and we've done it, but it's very hard. We did it at the cost of it being hard to maintain. And
Okay.
so today you can do it without that. I mean, fundamentally, the problem with the browser, this public, if you don't mind me going on a sidetrack, the problem with
No, it's always
um,
interesting. Yeah.
all this public software stuff is that when somebody owns it, if a Google or a Microsoft owns a platform, the rate at which they can evolve it if they want to is fairly quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So it's happened with this standards committee stuff, and Java's a shit language, and the browser's a shit way of doing it, and right, and all this stuff. You've got this. We're spending billions of dollars on producing shit software that's incredibly difficult to maintain and has an extraordinarily burdensome development cycle. And meanwhile, because it's so easy to use and use badly, legions of bad programmers with bad habits, with underskilled abilities come into the field, and you get what we see today. So
Right. Yeah. So it's a software product. It's not hardware at all. Is that right?
it's a software product. It doesn't need hardware. But
Oh, no.
you know, it's
So there's no assembly in China required or anything.
no, it's just. I mean, it's on the screen here. I can show it to you. Um, but the real problem is that we want it to be. Um, the problem is that you need the interface to create the data to apply the AI that produces the value. And so the problem is producing this alternative framework, and then giving the AI the freedom to not exploit you, but to tell you how to be better, right? In other words, think of it as the inverse of today. You don't pay anything to these companies, the Gap, the Google, the Facebooks, the Twitters, right? But they exploit you.
Yeah.
Well, what if that same thing was here, but it was trying to help you?
Yeah.
And so that's what the AI does. And it turned out to be you needed my intellectual project to be able to produce the AI.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I knew about how to design the application, even Wolfram has figured out what's had figured out that problem. So if you know what all the major platforms are that everybody runs all business and society on, they all are variations on one design. And so I just took the one design. Well, yeah, it's pretty simple. And so I just took the one design model and flipped it around, and so that the one architecture provides the solution to all problems.
And what's the original? Can I just interrupt and say, what's the original program that they're all based on? Is it like that? Can you?
I don't know what you're asking me.
If they're all basically the same program, they're all running the same design, I should say. Was there an original software?
Think of it this way: you've got a file on your computer, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't know anything about itself and doesn't have a life cycle. You can't govern it very easily. But
right.
So essentially, all information is some sort of object that follows that is essentially a task. It has a life cycle.
Right.
So we reduce. So instead of having an object-centered world, we have a life cycle centered world. And so everything goes through this sort of life cycle. In effect, it ends up being like, I don't know if you've played like an adventure game like Skyrim or one of those.
Yeah.
Well, fundamentally, that's a game engine, right? In a game engine, you have spaces, objects, actors, and things go through life cycles, right? They have states to go through life cycles. It's called a Markov chain or a state engine or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some state engines are simple and some are vast, complicated networks, etc. But at different points in a life cycle, different events are fired that cause changes to the environment and whatever. So effectively, it's an accounting system with essentially a game engine on top of it, where the user interface looks like your normal
something friendly,
right? So we've made a joke of we actually can build an adventure game in it, of course, right? But you would.
You should.
No, it's just like, well, that's just
Richard Garriott.
Ridiculous. So, but the point is that architecturally, it's architecturally it's not architecturally it's everything has an evolutionary purpose,
right?
And because many things aren't very different, right? I mean, they have these similarities. We can determine by how you interact with it over time, just like you interact with like news articles or tweets or something, which is like the primitive version. This thing will track those things, and it can compare how you interact with things versus other people, and it starts telling you about it's telling about your behavior. So in the world.
Well, that's amazing. Okay, so once again, a like simple question sends you down a path of like the minutia, both like philosophically and Darwinistically and everything else, and explained down to the tiny detail.
Sorry,
which is
brother.
amazing as usual. No, this is why I want to talk to you, because it's quite amazing.
The thing I wish I could convey to people, that all of the internal group, I mean, I've got a group of people now who are peers now, right? I mean, they're quite sophisticated. So the thing we wish we could communicate is how simple the universe is once you know this stuff.
Right.
Because there are only there's only one underlying pattern, and it only shows up in a handful of subsequent patterns.
Right.
And so when you see that pattern and you know the method, it's sort of like, explaining everything geometrically. It's very similar to that.
Right. And that's what we're here to talk about. Let me just say, this is what the show is about you explain. Last time you were on, you mentioned passingly, along with a whole other litany of utterly amazing proclamations, that everything's made of triangles. And so I had to hear more about this. I must know, because superstitiously or personally, I have for a long time been having. I started almost with dreams, or you read things about, say, 3 being like a holy number.
It is.
And, yeah, it is. Yeah, exactly. And I kept seeing things in 3s, and I kept thinking, and even having dreams, or even it didn't start with this, but I remember going up on a hike nearby here. There's an old pagan altar on the top of a hill, and there's 3 rowan trees there, and they're perfectly aligned, except for one is slightly out of alignment. And I always think of somehow that's meaningful, and I don't know how or why, just like personally, anecdotally, superstitiously, whatever.
It's the only thing you can know without knowing anything else.
Yeah.
In the simplest terms, if you have a thing, what do you got to compare it to? If you have things, you compare them to the other. But it's like the old math principle: 3 points test a line.
Yeah.
Right. It's the only point at which you have some idea. It's the minimum amount of information necessary you have to be able to ensure you're not making an error. Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
But from the universe's perspective, it doesn't have a way to remember anything, and so it hasn't got a way to predict anything. So it's not like us, right? We have the ability to remember, so we have the ability to predict. So when you look at 3 trees, you can predict something. You look at a tree, you predict something. You look at a path, you can predict something. Universe can't do that. It's just stuck with trial and error. Right. So since it's not got a way to remember anything, you sort of end up with the miracle of the triangle, which is you have a positive and negative pole, right? 2 opposites. And or a deviation from a mean, which would again be a positive and a negative pole. And you have a stable relation that captures enough energy to maintain that difference, or a collapse that doesn't. So the universe doesn't have to know anything except the discovery of a stable relation. And the universe is constructed out of stable relations. Now, if you want to go to pictures, I can start showing you.
And so the triangle is the symbol of the stable relation. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, that's when I say everything's built of triangles, evolution's constructed of the discovery of a hierarchy of continuous stable relations. And the reason, of course, is that just what a protoparticle consists of, or a particle consists of, is there's basically, think of it as enough velocity to prevent, there's enough energy producing enough velocity to prevent collapse back into the background. Well, so I mean, all we're doing is converting available energy into, which is in a disordered state, entropy, into an ordered state, which we call mass.
Okay, so let me just
hold on. The universe can't know anything, so there is no other geometric shape it can form other than a triangle. There's no other way to do it, because everything other than a triangle requires to be able to maintain some other presumption or prediction of another state.
Okay, so the existence of other shapes geometrically means what? The fact that we can see them means we've just.
Well, I mean, it's like, how do we measure shit in geometry? We measure it with triangles.
Right. Yeah. So
everything's measured by.
Is this like
the only stable relation?
Does this have a basis in Euclid, or was there certain books you read that you came up with this, or was this like your raw?
No, I discovered
observation of the world.
I went the other direction. I knew when I was working on AI in the 80s that you had to break it into before, during, and after states, and that's the only thing the universe could know. And so once we got into neurology, we figured out that the microcolumn, like your brain brooks into a bunch of nerves, they come into your neocortex, right? And they're in microcolumns, and these microcolumns, very, very, they're very thin, like hair-like strands of neurons, bundles of neurons. And the microcolumn is looking for sequences.
Okay.
Before, during, and after. And if it can correctly predict a before, during, and after, it saves that. Now, we don't think of it that way, but a neural column, when these little tiny micro columns can store basically an infinite number of associations of predictions.
So memory and prediction.
It's basically prediction. The memory consists of, it doesn't have, you don't have to have an observer. In other words, the way we think about our own memories is if there's a photograph back there and we're comparing a photograph. That's not what's happening. We're comparing the momentary, very fragmentary, momentary changes in stimuli in space. And so what happens in relation to our body? And so we build the world out of successful predictions. So only successful predictions survive. And so that's how the little bits of our brain cooperate in vast parallel numbers to correctly predict relations, fragments, forms, objects, spaces and backgrounds from how to disambiguate all this chaotic nervous shit nerves that are coming into us. We disambiguate that stuff by predicting moment to moment continuous sequences. So that's why there's no photograph stored anywhere. You're not comparing it to anything until you get to the point where you've built a world model. In other words, all this chaos has been sorted by competition into a world model in the middle of your head there. And once that's
virtual reality in your head, is it? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but the stupid thing, and I'll explain this later if I need to, but it's like consciousness and quality has turned out to be fucking trivial, because our body is just sorting stuff into correspondence with the reality by adversarial competition for prediction. So, I mean, it's just doing an incredibly stupid, simple thing of turning all these neural impulses, which are they just do this, right? It's just velocity that's all a nerve does.
Yeah.
Of turning that into this representation we have. And we think it should be miraculous when how else are you going to sort a mirror of actionable reality except by increasing correspondence to reality? When it's all you're doing is trying to predict your perception of reality. So it's kind of, in the end, we have all these philosophers talking about this stuff throughout history, and they make it sound so complicated, but at the end, it's so fucking obvious. It's painful.
Well, I mean, it is hard for me. I mean, when you say this, so if you just said that to your gang, your followers, they're all like, oh yeah, I get it, no problem.
No, I mean, I have to go over it 20 times. And then I have to pull up diagrams and walk them through it and explain it. But I mean,
right.
At the simplest version, I mean, if you have a tuning fork and another tuning fork, right? They either vibrate at the same frequency, which your nerves can tell, or they don't. Mm-hmm. But I mean, if you think of everything in the universe that we sense as vibration, that's all it is, right? Then how are you going to sort all those tuning forks?
Okay, let me just stop there. So how do you know everything in the universe is just vibration?
Well, what's the basis fucking of that? Light wave? I mean,
okay? Well,
what's your? I mean, everything's vibration. What does a nerve do? It sends pulses, but what are pulses? They're just vibrations.
Right. Okay.
So for us, a pulse, the vibration of a pulse in your nerves amounts largely to amplitude. But I mean, there's other stuff going on there. But I mean, just think of it that way. You're getting all this stimuli. Light is, eyes are the one we understand the best. I think we understand. I mean, physical touch, we know it's simple. Hearing was actually the hard one, I think, because
really,
because while it's easier to talk about, it's harder to inspect.
Right.
The reason's interesting is that when you're a fish, right, you're in the water and the water is hitting your bone. Right, it's hitting right, and so you can feel the vibration.
Okay.
So in our heads, these sort of what would normally have been gills sort of turn into the ear stuff, right, and get different bone.
Well, even all the senses, I always think like even when you see things like you think of the planets and in space, and like they're not meant to be necessarily seen by anything. Like the active sight is purely, incidental.
Our sight is as good as it needs to be. Like, why can't we see the ultraviolet? Because you can't fucking act on it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Right.
you can't.
So you see a very functional universe, like a planned, functional kind of. Am I using the wrong words? Maybe. But
yeah, I wouldn't use planned. I just mean that how, if you had to build an organism that could navigate through time and space, and you had to turn millions of sensory stimuli, basically think of every nerve you have as a thermometer, right?
Right.
You had to disambiguate that into, looking, hearing, feeling, tasting, smelling, all the head position, body position, velocity, etc. You had to figure out all that stuff. Well, how would you disambiguate one sense from another? No, there's one fragment of a sense, one eye pixel from another. The only way to do it is by correctly predicting reality.
So strange.
So it sorts by successful prediction. So that's how we evolve. We evolve into sorting by continuous recursive disambiguation of disorder into order, and that's what.
So is that your own? Like, that's not something you took from anybody else. You came up with that on your own. Is that true? Is that the case?
I think at present I'm better at explaining it than anyone else.
Right.
I follow Numenta. Numenta research, and everything that they quote in all their papers. I'm talking about, I follow the forum, I follow their publications. If they reference a publication, I read it. I follow Numenta. Numenta is Jeff Hawkins, the guy who invented the Palm thing, AI, the Palm thing. But he went over and he founded this this research institute, and they're trying to make code, and they've successfully done it, that basically reflects the human mind. And so the importance about thinking about code, the world, your mind as code is that code is operational. Mm-hmm. And in other words, you think of it as engineering. So how does information move from one place to the other? And of course, there's no value in me sitting here talking about the dot pattern representation of a rabbit on a background, and how many neurons it takes to actually filter that through.
Not that I'm sure you couldn't if you wanted to, but yes,
it's just no value in it. I mean, you lose the audience, because even if you have the pictures that they use from their presentations, it's too much. So what I do is I take their presentations, and if you go see my works on the foundations, which includes all this neurology stuff, you'll see how I work through the predictive process. The part that I didn't understand was that I said, everything evolved out of our need to move. In order to move, you need to know where your body is in space. And so you have, oh my God, I'm forgetting the word, knowing where your body is, embodiment. So you have to develop a sense of embodiment, which is an intuitive sense of where things are in relation to another. But that's, again, a disambiguation. It's got to happen. Well, that happens way down in the very bottom of your brain, really close to your brainstem, entorhinal cortex. And these little layers bring everything together. But that part is an outgrowth, is just a doubling over, like your neocortex, which is the thickness of a dinner napkin. That thing has got 6 layers to it, about depending on, because it varies based on what they're doing. But those 6 layers are a doubling over of the 3 layers down in there in the inside. Okay. And so what's happened is that we have the every part, every little segment of your brain knows where that stimulation is coming from in 3D space in relation to your body.
Okay.
Right. And so you have that information at one end. And then on top of that, you have the stimulation end that computes it. I'm vastly oversimplifying, but layers 1, 2, and 3 do all the pattern matching, and 4, 5, and 6
once again,
integrate it with your body position.
Right.
That was the part, in my view, that we were missing. Right. When I figured that out, that was the huge part. And so now, I mean, I keep diagrams of all this shit. We know what every circuit of the brain does, the major ones, right? I mean, I know the major functions of it. Now, some people are going to know more about the neurochemistry of a different particular thing because they're interested in that region, the function of that region of the brain at a more granular level. I'm not going to go into that level, and I don't have any interest in it. What I need to know is how is our experience manufactured from this information, and how do we think? How does thought made possible, and how do we vary in it?
Right.
So there's my level of understanding and description of the operational model of the brain and mind is probably better. I don't know anybody else who's close. Joshua Bach is close. Maybe, but aside from that, none of the philosophers are even they're not even in the right ballpark.
Have you considered writing a book just on this kind of thing, as well as your, other stuff? Or?
It's just part of the, it's part of the work. There's no way to. I mean, I get to solve this job. I get a job before I die. I get to solve the problem of lying, and I've solved that problem. This is a minor part of solving it.
So to solve that problem, you have to have the fundamentals of the universe solved and the human brain.
I just don't need to. I just don't. A lot of people want to be popular or whatever, and I don't really. If I get to talk to smart folks like you, that's fun. But everybody else is a drag. Everybody, normal people are a drag, really.
Well, thanks for calling me smart. I mean, it's very hard to keep up with everything you're saying.
It's better than not keeping up or thinking because you can't keep up that it's me that's wrong.
Yeah. No, I can tell that you definitely. I knew from before. Like I told you before, from debating you, that before you say anything, you've got it covered from every possible angle that anybody could imagine.
Or I wouldn't say it.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. No, it's true. You definitely have some kind of.
People say you don't do it, but I do it all the time. Like I just did it, right? I don't know the biochemistry of the speech center, right? I mean, I know that if I went and spent time on it, I would know it, but I don't.
Yeah.
Right. So I can't argue about that. Yeah. If you want to talk about the chemistry of in general, how the dendrites evolve and how that life cycle works and how neurons fire. I know all that stuff. I'll get the chemistry wrong half the time. I mean, I'll get the names of the chemicals wrong because I think of it as charges. But,
right. But it's like utterly fascinating for you to, and that the fact that from studying, what do you call it? Not AI, but the artificial worlds, the computer worlds, virtual reality, and then from that studying AI, that you would come up with a theory of the universe. Based on that, it seems a very logical thing to happen, I guess. But
it's just accidental. The problem is that's what it means to be my kind of autistic, is I just see patterns.
Right.
And those there's a bias to the patterns that says remove anything that can't be there. Right.
Can't be there. Right.
In other words, reduce everything to first causes. In other words, what's the most parsimonious method? And so I just see patterns, and then because I've gone through so many fields, not a lot of people do that. So if you try to master a field, it might mean something more than is necessary to operationalize a field.
Right.
So if you can operationalize a lot of fields without becoming a master of applying that field. And this is important. So I understand the foundations of mathematics painfully deeply. But you wouldn't ask me to go solve a hard math problem. That's applied math.
Right.
Right. I mean, you have to be able to bring all this stuff, and those are two different things. Yeah. So it's like being an architect for a building. You know how buildings are constructed. You know what HVAC has to do, plumbing has to do, but I don't fucking know what connector to use on this gauge of wire for this many amps.
Yeah.
Right. That's and so what I hope to do to people is give them an operational understanding of the universe.
And the theories, well, so I've also heard you make takedowns of popular theories, which I like to hear. I wouldn't mind hearing a bit about that, like string theory or Einstein. I like you both. I heard you say that they're the
same problem.
Okay, let's hear that.
Well,
if you can summarize.
What's wrong with math? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so math can be performed the European way as geometry. And geometry is a derivative of engineering, of human action. It's based in realism. Algebra, it was invented in the Middle East for the purpose of um, astrology. So it's based on the occult.
Mm-hmm.
But the way to convert this into cognitive terms, it's European action versus Middle Eastern verbal logic. So there's always the problem, just like there is between Aristotelian, Epicurean, and Democritean realism and Platonic literature. The same problem happens in mathematics, which we call math as a system of measurement and math as a narrative. And so what happened was we've had this demarcation problem between the people who think in math as words and people who think of math as realism, like idealism versus realism, words versus actions, imagination versus existential reality. And so this has been around a long time. Descartes comes along, and by coming up with the Cartesian model, he basically restores realism to mathematics. So that really makes a big difference. I don't want to understand how that makes a big difference, but between the restoration of Aristotle in 1200, the development of writing, the rise of empirical thought, Descartes, and then Newton and all those other guys, you sort of restored the mathematical realism. What happened in 1830 is that Babbage invented the computer as we understand it. This is important because the Antikythera device was 200 BC and lost. And it took us till 1830 to come up with it again.
Yeah.
And this is terrifying.
2,000 years, yeah.
Right. And so what's additionally terrifying is that Babbage was a craftsman, not a philosopher or a theoretician or even a mathematician.
Right.
And so he never converted his ideas into a general theory. In fact, we wouldn't know that much except for, I think it was his wife wrote everything down.
Really?
And so if we'd have had the computer back in 1830, we would have had mathematical realism tied to computation.
Okay.
Right? So we would have had but what happened instead is that we had to wait until Turing in 1930, whatever.
40,
whatever,
45.
I don't know, somewhere in 30. I
37.
should remember, and I don't. So in that period, we had the restoration of mathematical verbalism. So you get Cantor in mathematics and Cantorian in Cantor in infinities. Well, right. There aren't multiple infinities. What Cantor did is he removed the constraint of operations and time from reality in order to just create infinities, right? So he made it ideal. Instead of saying, if you operationalized Cantor, one set will produce numbers faster than another set, but neither will ever reach infinity. Right? There's infinity just means I don't fucking know.
Right.
So this happened, but this continued. We saw this happen with the rise of the philosophical analytic philosophy and that failed program. And so that, we get Wittgenstein, we get Russell, we get, all the way through Frege and whatever. And it finally gets to Popper, and he's like, this is not right. You guys have got something wrong here. And so what happened is that, so I want to explain this importantly because you'll understand why almost all the pseudoscientists, including Cantor in mathematics, um, Freud in psychology, Bose in anthropology, Marx in economics and sociology, Gould in genetics, Lewontin in genetics. All
Quite a
these.
list of names.
Well, I have a huge. I mean, I keep this huge list of all the Jewish pseudoscientists, right? And the number, and what's happening is that they're coming up with these pseudosciences. They're all based on the same non-operational problem. Now, I'll tell you a secret that isn't well known is that men and women differ in how they do math. Women tend to treat math as language and use pictures, and men tend to build systems and models. Quite a bit harder to build a model, but then you can take a model farther than you can a verbal or picture.
Right.
This is important, right? So you're going to have more women easier at addition and ordinary calculation, right up until the point where only thing you can do is systematize thinking. What do you notice between Cantor and Einstein and Bohr's mathematics? Because Bohr also is a pseudoscientist as well as Einstein, is that they're doing math with pictures like women. Right. And so not only is Cantor and Freud and Bose and Marx and everybody else I'd mentioned. I'm going to bring in my favorite lawyers, which are Rez, Kelson, and Dorkin, who are the reason we're in the shitstorm of our law right at the moment. Okay. Right. So all these people are using a verbal logic. What's Jewish history? It's based on a verbal logic. Is verbal logic designed to match reality? No, it's designed like female logic to reach consensus. So it's non-falsificationary, it's justificationary, where our logic in Europeans is falsificationary. Is it operationally possible? So, of course, I'm going to beat up on Einstein and Bohr because, Einstein uses these pictures and he gets it fucking wrong. Now, is it 100% wrong? No. But it's wrong enough to re-Platonize mathematics for a fucking century, which means we haven't achieved anything in physics since the 70s. What about Bohr? He doesn't. You know what Bohr says? He doesn't say, "Well, we have to figure this out." He says, "Well, it worked. Let's just do the math. We don't have to understand it." Right. Doesn't that sound a lot like women should be believed?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I mean,
no, it's the same origin. I'm just telling you, it is the same origin.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
So what in Einstein's major theories can I ask you to get wrong?
Well, the whole thing is we know we know quantum mechanics is right, but we admit it's purely statistical, meaning that we can't discover causality from it. We can only describe. Now we know that when we try to integrate that with at the macro scale with relativity, that relativity works at certain scales, just like Newton worked at human scale. Einstein's worked at certain scales, but it doesn't work at very, very large scales. Well, why? Because it's a picture. So he says time dilates. No, the rate at which at subatomic process changes varies based on velocity. That velocity can be increased by literally moving faster, or by gravity, which is the same thing as producing velocity, right? I mean, it's just two different ways of producing it. Right. So does space bend? No. Things moving through space bend. Space is a measurement. Or this other shit that there's 3 dimensions. Okay, let's really blow your mind now. If the universe can't remember can't remember anything, it's stuck with 3. Of course there's 3 fucking dimensions because there's nowhere else to store any other information that's predictive. Of course there's 3 dimensions. Right. So, I mean, it's like you start going through this stuff. There's a guy who's written some book at the 100 things Einstein got wrong. And it's kind of hysterical because he really goes to town on it, right? But, and so, but the underlying problem is that if you understand what's wrong with math, which I've tried to imply here, is that it can be either real or fictional. It can either be operational or verbal. Then you know what's wrong with math. You know what they did wrong to math.
Right. So they just kind of verbalize their way into making up fancy sounding things like string theory. and without a strong enough basis in anything parsimonious.
Right. So string theory is basically saying that whatever's going on below the quantum level, in other words, because you have the wave level, right?
Yeah.
Below the wave level, there's this bubbling foam we call the quantum background. Whatever the hell's going on in there, we can model it as a bubbling foam.
Okay.
Right. But whatever's going on down there looks a lot like vibrating strings.
Okay.
But that's not that's a mathy representation of something.
Okay.
Now, the thing I try to avoid without blowing people's minds too much is that if I say all computation is operational, in other words, actionable, it's real, and all mathematics is statistical. In other words, if I make a geometric object consisting of points, that is a sufficiently accurate description of things of some object relative positions rotating in space, but it's not infinitely precise, right? I mean, it's the difference between a digital and analog. And if I turn a potentiometer by this gradient, I can make a potentiometer large enough so I can get very fine tune it, but a digital scale only works by whatever digits are programmed into it.
Right. Okay.
And so think of it that way: is that all math as they practice it is statistical. So there's information loss. Well, now if you go and you say, well, all math is the math they're using is narrative instead of descriptive, then there's more information loss. Well, if you lose all that information, of course you can't describe what's going on underneath because you have nothing to deduce from. But if you instead describe the universe as really obvious, spinning dipoles, stable relations, and waves, whatever, then it becomes fucking obvious, right? Well, I mean, obvious. You can. So it's like, why doesn't you want to fix this? Have the government give out a $10 million prize to the first group who creates a classical description of quantum mechanics.
Okay.
Right? And then that'll win and we'll settle the problem. But you have all these people built their careers on string theory, which is mathiness. In other words, in economics, we know about mathiness because we know math fails.
Yeah.
But in physics, they have the failure has taken this long.
And Einstein, people like Einstein are considered like saints. You couldn't even begin to say something, academically bad, negatively towards them.
There's an Einstein industry for a political reason, and we know what that is. So, I mean, you should go back and say all the people that fed into Einstein, right? I mean, it's a huge number of people.
Yeah. Well, he did get, he was working on the atom bomb, and he had these very material, successful success stories, I guess, with his, it was, like you said,
no disrespect. You don't blame a woman for thinking like a woman, right? She's a woman, right? Right. And so you don't blame an Einstein for thinking like what he is, right? He just did, and he did and God damn it, he got close. If Hilbert had continued without Einstein moving first, we probably would be better off.
So you think if that, like you said, someone produced a classical model, that we could end the stagnation and see a new blossoming fruition of both philosophy and theories and math, etc. Or would you say that this?
It's going to come from right now. It's coming from AI.
Okay.
So what's happening is that just like philosophy got crucified over the past century.
It did. Yeah.
Right. Because the analytic project ended at a dead end when they figured out that there's no closure except reality, meaning logic was a dead end. It wasn't to be. There was no logic equivalent in verbal logic to mathematics, and mathematics itself was incomplete. So there's no closure other than reality. In other words, you have to have an applied case in order to make a truth claim.
Applied case, right? Yeah.
Right. And so the same thing's happening to physics, and it's coming from AI because it's those of us in AI that understand what's wrong with math.
Wow. And is this a popular upswelling? It's not just you and Some other lunatics?
It's there. I can name everybody who has a piece of it. The only three people I know who aren't wrong is me, Yasha Bach, and Stephen Wolfram.
Okay, three. Once again, the holy number, though. That's all you need, obviously.
Well, I mean, it's kind of funny because it's a Jew, a German, and an Anglo, and you'd expect well, I would have expected that.
Yeah,
it's like Rothbard, Hoppe, and me, right? A Jew, a German, and an Anglo. In order to have reality, you've got to get all three together, right? And competing, because the truth is the part of the truth is coming from each one. So I just think that's ironic.
Well, I have a quick question too, and forgive me if this is incredibly naive. I don't really know these things really, but sorry, what?
It's not. As long as it's an intellectually honest conversation where I can say what I mean, I'm happy. It's argue with fucking imbeciles that tell me that evolution doesn't exist or that numbers do. I mean, I'm like, I can't help you, dude.
Yeah. No, I was just wondering, how does your universe model fit in with the Big Bang theory and all that?
There's no way to know. I'm not sure yet. It's like there are three models of the Big Bang at least, and there are three models of the universe at least.
Right.
And it's not clear that the redshift is what we're seeing at the large scale. And it's not clear that the cosmic microwave background is telling us we think it is. Now, are these theories more right than wrong? Probably, but it's not clear they're right yet.
Right.
It's do we know if the universe is a one-off? Do we know if it's infinite, or do we know if it's what they call multiple universes, which isn't like the sci-fi parallel universes. It just means that it's more like the bubbling foam on top of your dish pan, right? Your pasta, right? Where each of those bubbles is a universe, and they're always going, right, popping and remaking. We don't know that that's a possibility. The Big Bang could have been a chain. It could have been a central reaction, chain reaction, or it actually could have happened more like the whole thing just went off, right? And it's something. I'm doing this badly because I'm not thinking it through. But there's a spectrum of choices there. It's some bang happened.
Okay.
So some of that happened.
Right. You don't have the idea that the universe was always there, always will be. There was a beginning. And
well, I mean, this is the thing that you get into is that when we say time, we mean change.
Right.
Right. So there's a difference between sequence and change. Right. One thing follows another, and then change.
Yeah.
Well, so there is a stable. I just posted this a minute ago because somebody repeated this idiocy. It says, "Well, there is no absolute time." Well, that's false. There's a constant rate of time at the 0 point, which is what we call the temperature, pressure, and energy of the cosmic microwave background, or excuse me, at the quantum background. So there's definitely an energy level there, and at that particular energy level, whatever is going on there is creating the passage of time as a constant. The faster you go, the more it'll change. The slower your relative position is, the more it'll change. The closer you get to a gravity well, the more it'll change. So, I mean, these things can change, but you're talking about the process of by which the some subset of the material world changes. So time is, it's like, so the reality is we don't know what time means anymore once you get back to, in other words, we don't know what time means at those kind of densities, right? For all that the universe could know is that it's always now, it's always been now. It's never been any other moment.
So time is, time is always a difficult concept. It's like, in many ways, I always think, I would think this is parsimoniously, and I would, think that I'm a great genius for thinking this, but whatever. It's probably everyone has thought of this, I'm sure, but that just we as humans invent these concept. This is like you're saying the verbal language types. You invent a concept for something that isn't necessarily applicable to reality or perfect 100% rational. Maybe even you could say this of time. I don't know. Maybe not. But even like say our idea of the universe, when we think of it, generally is like it only really matters to us in a way. Necessarily it doesn't necessarily. When you make a concept, it may not have a basis in reality, even though it makes sense to a human. In the same kind of relative way that an ant can make a brilliant ant hive, and you could show an ant like a Stanley Kubrick movie and say, "Isn't this great?" But the ant doesn't give a shit. It means nothing to him. But that's pure relativism, I guess. But like I don't know if
you brought up two at least two really good ideas there. The first is kind of, I'm going to forget the other one. So the first is really kind of interesting, which is that life is only possible. Matter is only a fragment of the universe, the energy in the universe. I think I went through this last time. A yellow sun at the right temperature is only a tiny fragment of that. A rocky planet in the habitable zone is a tiny fragment of those. A rocky wet planet in the habitable zone is a tiny fragment of those. A rocky planet around a yellow sun in the habitable zone that's water, has the right temperature, isn't tidally fixed, and has a moon that keeps the core liquid, creating a magnetic field that protects it from radiation, is even better because now we can have an atmosphere. You just keep going down to these are tiny, tiny, tiny things, but you get to the same problem of bodily mass. Is that there's only a range of sizes that life can exist in.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and so there's only a range of actions that the universe can bring into being. Does that make sense? There's only you can't have human size, brontosaurus sized humans, right? You can't build them, right?
Right.
And so there's this narrow little window. So, and it isn't really intelligent life is extremely costly. So unless it's really easy for that intelligent life to keep increasing the food source, food source, then because that's what we've done, right? We swapped belly and digestion for brain. Right? Yeah. Is that you get into this problem of we've created this hamster wheel for ourselves. So if you notice, we're running out of energy, right? Because we keep consuming more energy in order to.
Yeah.
So we do have a natural incentive to get off the rock.
Yeah.
And so because we're going to have to. The problem is that all of space is a vast, hellish, irradiated wasteland as far as we can tell.
Yeah.
And then moreover, we can't move through it very quickly because of this problem of the quantum background and the rate of change as we go through it, and the fact that the energy level of the quantum background is unimaginable to us. It's so large. And so, we think of it as cold, dry space, but the energy necessary to make that little millimeter of cold, dry space is tremendous. So we don't think about it that way. So we have this incredible incentive to discover the laws of the universe so that we can simply find a way to circumvent the problem of moving at the speed of electromagnetism, not electromagnetic waves. And so, am I using the right term there? Yes, I think so. Somebody will correct me if I get it wrong.
Let's hope. No, I won't.
Well, I mean, there's a speed. In other words, part of the universe appears. Most of the universe has a speed limit, right?
Right.
But there's parts of the universe that we think don't. Right. And the question is whether we can get to that. Now, if we can get to that, then we can consume all the energy in the fucking available universe, right? But if we can't get that, we're screwed. If we can do it, then we can probably talk to other planets if there are any, right? But we can't. And it might turn out that, we know that is possible down there, but there's no way to organize enough energy to make use of it. So because we have all these incentives to do these things, so it does matter, at least to those of us who think beyond the end of our dicks.
Yeah, well, I never understand people at all that aren't into the space exploration or aren't even remotely excited. People actually get angry about it and like, no, we can't do that. How stupid. And like, don't even want to try.
You don't want to tell them that actually you're stupid, because every one of the extra people like you is a dead weight on humanity.
Yeah, but where do they even get this? Why do what happened to the old spirit of like you climb the mountain because you can kind of thing? Like, why
because that's Arianism, and the rest of the world doesn't do Arianism.
Well, I mean, these are other European guys that I see. There's a lot of them that just don't like I don't really get it.
They're called pussies.
Pussies. Well, I mean, a lot of them are. You know how it is. You can meet someone. You can be 90% agreeing about something, about everything, and then they just have this opinion they're raving about, and you totally disagree, and you just kind of like, okay, I'll forgive them that or whatever.
Well,
I don't get it. I don't get it.
The lion doesn't ask permission of the lamb.
Oh, we got to do it. Like, yeah, that's why I've always been a supporter of old Elon Musk, and I would like wrote some articles about him, and like you get a lot of flack. Oh, you love the billionaires, and I'm like, well,
I don't care if he's a billionaire. I care that he gets shit done.
Yeah, he does. Like, he's not like the Jeff Bezos, who's just like a reptile. I hope maybe you'd like him too. Like, you like the Bill Gates.
I hated that guy when he lived in a fucking garage in my town. Right? I fucking disliked him then. I didn't know him. I knew of him.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, you can tell he's just a snake. And he doesn't like design his own, new kind of relandable rocket or whatever you call it. Like, so
Mark, I don't think much Amazon either, and but that's anyway. I made a lot of money from him.
yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good. But yeah. So I guess we get to the bottom. We
get to the bottom of the fact that there's basic cognitive differences between the sexes that are expressed in the way we solve problems and the scale of problems we can solve. Different groups specialize in 6 differences in cognition and express that in their terms. The primary problem the West faces is that while we escaped theology, largely it's still somewhat with us. And worse, part of that Middle Eastern influence is still in verbal and treating mathematical Platonism, which we'll even see out of such cherished fellows as Sir Roger Penrose, falls victim to it, and he and his pictures. And so what you'll see is that computation was the innovation we needed to have, because we failed at computation and realism, and we got very utopian thinking because of the Industrial Revolution. We opened the door to the female way of talking about academic subjects. We brought those female thinking academics into the picture. They half solved a problem, the half truth to solving that problem, like the half truth of solving Freud and Bose and Marx and every other half truth they made, created a restoration of basically sophistry and superstition, or pseudoscience, and we are just struggling to get our way out of it, and we've lost the better part of a century in physics and certainly the social sciences because of them. And so again,
I just have to ask. So you refer to it as Platonism a lot. Like I'm really into Plato. I consider myself a Platonist, and you put a lot of blame on him there. So what is it in Plato that really describes this thinking?
Idealism versus realism.
Right, but we must have idealism too. Like even our space fighting against space, as difficult as it is, it involves idealism, right?
That's different idealism.
Okay.
The forms. Right.
You don't put
the pretense that forms exist rather than we identify forms.
Okay.
Right. So mathematical Platonism is saying numbers describe a real universe of numbers, instead of we can imagine using numbers, we can imagine a great deal with numbers. And so when we say that's what we mean by idealism, is sophistry that uses a pretense of knowledge, which is essentially a pseudoscientific substitute for knowledge. It's empirical knowledge.
So I thought the forms were more just to do with. I didn't even think of it in terms of math and numbers when I would read him about the forms. But like, so if he has an idealized idea of forms of numbers, that you say that's problematic because that just allows for
you to create any kind of nonsense you want. I mean, it's just all it is theology by verbal means. So he created from God made to God made this world to this world exists. So this is, and the rabbinical Judaism did this on purpose. They took it knowingly that that's what they were able to do. So,
well, yeah, I have a problem with that. I don't know.
Well, I mean, you have a problem with it for natural reasons, is because you've built a lot of frames on it, but you've also not gone anywhere bad with it. The problem is, you end up with Rousseau and Marx, Hegel and Kant and Marx.
Yeah, but they're pretty far away from Plato. Like, putting the blame on Plato, I find is a bit harsh. That's all. I just love Plato, and so for somebody, I find Plato the root of Western civilization, really, in many ways, more so than I would the Bible or anything like that. I would put more.
I would find, okay, so that would be the truth for literary, but if you want, in other words, this is the same thing for people who study philosophy today versus the scientists and engineers, is they're reading literary. They're reading stories, not measurements. And so we're still stuck with the old battle between the Aristotelians, empiricists, and the Plato and his literary group. So I would say literary is useful for the low cost attainment of meaning, and the lowest cost and a lower cost means of communicating, but they need to be falsified by operationalism and reality, so that we can disambiguate the meaning that is consistent and correspondent, even if not complete, from that meaning that is the means by which fraud and deceit are conveyed.
Right.
So,
but you love classical antiquity as much as me or anybody else, and like a lot of that is based on idealized Platonic form in a way, like, and their idea of the what's the Mandelbrot thing, the fractals, where the Fibonacci sequence and everything is like in all their sculpture, like the finger on the sculpture is in proportion to the hand, in proportion to the body, following a mathematical sequence. So this is where we get so much beauty values from and stuff like that. Stuff is very abstract but has value.
Yeah, but then is that form exist, or do we is that form, as Plato claimed, out there like heaven, or is it just that we observe the general rule of evolutionary development, which is, of course, the Nautilus shell? So I mean, when we say this, so that's the big difference. Are you claiming it's another reality like heaven? Or are you claiming that there is just humans identify this pattern in nature?
I would say it's like, no, I'm not claiming there's absolutely no definite evidence for heaven or anything like that. Or I wouldn't even go for the ultimate comparison that way and reach for heaven as to compare. But that is, I know he had a lot of his talk was relating to ideas about God, for sure, and which Christianity borrowed.
But that's the only complaint. The complaint is are you talking about ideals? In the sense that they're reals, or are you talking about ideals in the sense of meaning? In other words, it's easier to convey meaning by narrative than just like it's easier to convey it by mythology. So if you want an abstract idea, you can talk about it in ideal terms. All of geometry is ideal, right? It's
all of it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So I mean, as I say, the forms are ideals. There are no lines in nature. So
well, it's true, but for myself, I like to hold on to a part of that always, anyways, and I think it helps and plays into things. If you can only reach for that description of things, which you end up calling God and so forth. I don't know. I think it's a handy for these inexplicable things that like we said, the origin of the universe.
You just think of it like this. I mean, it's just a spectrum. You want to devolve. You need to be able to communicate to a child through empathy and imitation.
Yeah.
You'd be able to communicate to an adult through reason, and you need to be able to communicate to a judge through or a general through empiricism.
But eventually, say with what you're doing, you're going to need to communicate that to more average type people, and you're going to need something a bit more holistic, or
right. I mean,
you're gonna have to morph into Alex Jones and like start
God
ranting about demons. And
the way we do it is we think of it as more like poetry. Is that there are a finite number of poems, which are sayings, to memorize, and we can put those on about 5 posters. And if you have that, then you have it. But
all
right,
that's very Platonic as well. Although he did want to outlaw poetry, I suppose.
Well, it's just a continuous recursive disambiguation of energy. I mean, it's just, or the basis of Western civilization.
You need to make it rhyme. You need to get words that rhyme.
No, we can't. But anyway, it's possible to remember them, right? This way, but it's not. It's again. How did they popularize the Constitution? They fucking printed it and implemented it and sent it out. Right. You can. So there's a difference between the science and the distribution. I've always said my job is the science.
Yeah.
Which is the law. I'm not signing up for distribution. And if humanity wants it, they can fucking have it. And if they don't, tough shit. I did my fucking duty.
Yeah.
Right. I don't care. I did my job. So it's not my job to. It's not. I can't drag the horse to water. And from my standpoint, I'm terrified because, as I said earlier today, the evidence is that the very thing that provides us advantage, which is the ability to imitate, empathize, and sympathize being intellectual, empathize being emotional, and it allows us to cooperate, right? So that we can discover how to cooperate, but that very empathy and sympathy doesn't allow us to suppress the reproduction of the unfit. And so essentially we're lemmings using empathy to commit suicide.
Yeah.
And so I think that is the problem for any intelligent cooperating species, is that it looks like devolution and collapse is the natural cycle of cooperating systems. Because
that's like Spengler, Spengler's theory.
Well, say it here.
It was that civilizations basically are like living organisms, and they were born, have a golden age, and then they die a miserable old age, and there's nothing you can do about it. And
but it's not true for Europe. That's because we're federated. So as soon as somebody dies, the next guy picks up.
So that's the thing. Well, a new one, like it's a cycle that comes and goes. But like his idea, he was writing around, was it early 20th century, anyways. And his idea was that now the next cycle would be the West, led by America, like the American Empire was now. Once the civilization starts recognizing itself and thinking of itself as a whole, I think he said, like when the Greeks perfected the, was it the Doric or the Ionic column or whatever, like around the time they became aware of themselves and perfected what they were at, that was actually the moment they kind of die and everything else is a downward slope, and there's like nothing you can do about it. And once they're wrapped around, they're tied to an ideal, like a religion usually, and it's like it has a lifespan.
Right. So all human exploitation of opportunity follows the same cycle into the exhaustion of opportunity. That's the correct frame. I'm saying that something's more insidious. I'm saying that the fact that that we're worried about what's the great filter for life in the universe, and the great filter is embodied in our sense of empathy. So what happens is the more empathic and sympathetic and imitative we are, the more we can cooperate in larger and larger numbers, producing greater and greater conditions. The problem is what we will do is continue to cooperate without suppressing the reproduction of the bottom until we collapse, which is what every civilization seems to do. Is they train to breed themselves to collapse, and it's frustrating.
Yeah. Well, we're far off the topic of triangles. So you're saying, let me just say, like, you don't. So do you look for triangles in your work now, and you think, do you almost see it symbolically, or even, dare I say,
I
not
mean,
too much?
it's like we're going to get a cup made that says "I see triangles,"
Oh yeah,
right?
so you
Because
do.
once you start seeing it, you see the general rule everywhere. And so, I have my screen here. My screen open. We've produced an awful lot of drawings, and I mean, there's a lot of people involved in my stuff. Butch Long Leghorn, Nick Land, a guy named I forgot his name. I want to say Dax. Anyway, we've produced all these triangles now. I'm just trying to show. My goal has been to show that it's the fabric of it's. There's only one general rule to the universe, and it just like fractals, it expresses itself everywhere, and it becomes really this. My claim of evolutionary computation becomes relatively obvious, and as it works its way across all of mankind, all expressions of mankind. So, if you want me to go through some of that, I can do that.
Maybe briefly, yeah, because it just I like. So you, when you work, you start with the basis of a triangle. You think of a triangle and how you can do it in threes in a way. Or
Well, what
you typically
happened
look
is I saw, I think I knew about before, during, and after, and I saw some other things. But what helped a lot was the three means of coercion, which are force and defense, right? Via
right,
positiva, via negativa, seduction and ostracization, right? Which is the
right, all right,
feminine, and cooperation or trade and boycott, which is the neutral. And
right,
so if you take that triangle and you flip it on its side a little bit, so you have the female off to the left and the ascendant male trade at the top and the dominant male force at the bottom, you end up with describing the sex differences in group evolutionary strategy and all human behavior plottable on this sort of grid. Everything from psychological biases all the way up to group evolutionary strategies. So you see this whole spectrum, and so what you're seeing that the primary axis of human variation is sex, and among the sexes, the individual versus in male sexes, individual versus group, and you start seeing this everywhere, and that's all there is. Then you look at background, you say, well, how does the universe collect information? How does the universe evolve? And it evolves by the fact the universe is under pressure. The only way to relieve pressure is to either expand, which we call entropy, or to concentrate, which we call mass. And then all mass of a very small part of the universe ends up as mass, and a tiny bit of it ends up as us. But the maximum rate of evolutionary calculation is sex. It's the largest difference the universe has come up with. It can't come up with more than two, for the same reason it can't come up with more than two charges, for the same reason it can't come up with more three dimensions. So it comes up with two sexes. So two sexes are the fastest rate of evolutionary computation. The two sexes specialize more. We've discovered more cooperation between the sexes, and the area under that triangle determines the surface area of trial and error of different personalities can experiment with. So this explains why there's such a wide variety of personality traits, intelligence, whatever among humans, is because we have the two sexes plus all those traits, and those traits cover the maximum adaptive surface area of time and space. So this is why we adapt so quickly.
And when you start, like, what's the limit of available novelty? That's a crazy question to ask about the universe, I guess. But like, can it, when it starts these systems and you get a triangle leads to other portions of the triangle beneath it, and things grow in novelty and complexity, like, that's not an infinite thing, or it does it? You know what I mean?
I mean,
language.
The recombination is infinite.
It is infinite.
Yeah, sure. I mean, language is infinite, math is infinite, logic is infinite, evolution is infinite. Now, there's certain constraints on it. I mean, certainly gravity, mass, energy is one of them. But it's very hard to imagine what it's very hard to imagine what's any limit to evolution.
So the basis of eternity is in the triangle. Could I say something so poetic, or is that?
Say in?
The basis of eternity is in the triangle. Yeah.
What's the first principle? That's why I say in everything, you want to discover the first principle. Now, of course, I say the triangle because I'm trying to give people an ideal. I'm trying to feed you back on your Platonism there.
Oh, nice.
I'm trying to give people a model,
yeah.
right? A model by which to uses a general system of measurement by which to explain all aspects of life. And
Right.
so the triangle happens to explain it. You saw this before in Nolan charts, right? Political charts, but they were 4 angles rather than 3. And there was one side of the Nolan chart that was always empty. It turns out that's impossible. So what we've got is the 3 angles we've collapsed into a triangle. Well, I mean, we've just said causality begins at the one way the universe can solve its stresses, which is by rotation and polarization, leading to accumulation of differences in polarity, which produce mass, and that ends up being, sex at this scale, and among the sexes it ends up being expressed as tri-functionalism, the 3 means of coercion. Because there's only 3 means of coercion, we're going to specialize in some combination of those 3 means of coercion, and that's going to explain all human behavior. Even our personality traits are, if you go to the big 5 plus intelligence, it's just explained as before, during, and after. If you go to our moral biases by hate, Jonathan, hate is just again expressible on that triangle as a division of reproductive labor. So I mean, hate's 6 moral things are just how you would treat private and common property. So we have, all human behavior is reducible acquisition, and all variation in human behavior is expressible in these triangles. So it's just kind of, it makes you feel a little sad, really, that this mystery that we've built up, and it's really quite simple.
Well, in a way, though, you are it sounds like you're being perfectly rational, say, all the way through it, and very, it's very materialistic to say all human behavior is acquisitional. But I can see the truth of it, but it's hyper simplified materialist kind of way to view things. But
it's how your brain works, right? Every action you have is simply providing serotonin to encourage you to go to acquire something. Now, you may not think of it as acquisition, right? You may not think of it as acquisition. Rest, you want to acquire rest. You may want to acquire a friendship. You may want to acquire, right?
But it's just to boil it down to that word. Just, I don't know.
Well, no, what it is.
No, I know what you mean. I don't disagree. I just think it's I don't know. But what I was going to say, Should I now? I lost it. Oh yeah, that you're coming around about with this triangles business, whether you mean to or not, because I know you're being perfectly rational, is that it sounds a bit more esoteric again, and that there's a little bit of action in that where it kind of is exciting, and that makes it feel like it's fruitful ground. You know what I mean? Like
it's
something that excites people.
You brought it up earlier. How are you going to make it so people understand it? Right. So I can state, which I have, all the rules, or I can try to generalize that into some system of measurement. And so I've generalized it into a system of measurement that's based on the first cause of the universe. And all you're seeing is that first cause appear at different scales of human experience. So from the group evolutionary strategy to the political, to the moral, to the social, to the interpersonal, to the sexual, to the cooperative, down to the biological, you're seeing that all the way down, and all the way down to the subatomic world and everything. So it's a good way of saying what's the first principle, and how do you apply this first principle across all of it? Same way, the first principle of all of mathematics is just positional ordinal names and positional naming. Well, that's the first principle of it. You do all that with the language of math. I'm just trying to give people a way to disambiguate the world, so they can convert it to first principles, so they can determine the difference between truth and falsehood, or honesty and deception.
And so what is it about the current model, the current wordy model of the universe, that leads to the like what precisely leads to the stagnation where their ideas just end and have not gone any further? Like what about Einstein's method and others ends in such a dead road? Do you think?
Well,
Like
I mean,
specific.
like I said, we failed in the 1800s.
Mm.
We failed to complete the empirical project.
So just because it's false, it goes nowhere.
Yeah,
Right.
it worked. It doesn't mean it's like why did Newton was false, but it worked enough, right? At that
Okay.
scale, right? And
Right.
you know, I mean, Marxism killed 100 million people so far, and woke is bringing about the end of a civilization. But it's because we didn't solve the problem of what's true.
Right.
When we got to social science, our church is a great example. Is that Aquinas basically got it right, and the church wouldn't carry the movement across the line in relation to in response to Darwin when they could have just claimed fucking victory and said, look, we've been right all along. Science says so.
Yeah.
Right. The church could have reformed, but they doubled down on superstition the same way that the Marxists doubled down on the false promise to the underclass. So why is because we don't want the truth. Who wants the truth? The people who want the truth is those people that want to stop the liars from stealing from them.
Yeah.
But what does everybody else want? They want their comforting lies.
Yeah.
And they want to institutionalize those comforting lies. I mean, I put up with fucking fundamentalist Christians every goddamn day,
Right.
telling me that evolution never happened or whatever. And it's like arguing with fucking 6-year-olds, right? I mean,
Yeah, they get very, they're quick to anger. They don't, yeah, it's true. They
right.
don't,
And so it's like, I don't want to disabuse you of your thing. If you want to tell me that Jesus was a philosopher and the Jefferson Bible is the most moral explanation of interpersonal behavior ever, I'm going to tell you that scientifically it's true. If you're going to tell me that there's anything good about churchiness, I'm sorry. The evidence is quite the contrary, and it's quite the contrary by you arguing with me about evolution using the same method of dishonesty that that the church uses for the social construction of their falsehoods.
See, what I would say about the church, though, is when you do get to the next problem that you're not concerned with, which is, say, propagandizing and influencing the average person, religion is, having a religion or a cult is probably one of the best ways.
Well, right. My only argument is now that we know the fucking answer, why don't we just say that the Christian ethic was correct? Here's why. And you can have absolute faith in it now because it's true.
You still have to say it in a completely crazy way. With threatening hell like, and or something.
It's like
something really primal.
Yeah, I guess. I have smart people disease. I know I have smart people disease. Every major mistake I've made in life is because I have smart people disease.
I cut out for a second there. Yeah, sorry, but I was just saying. Yeah, they're just like a primal animal, and they motivated by promises of heaven and threats of hell. It was a great motivator. That's really what. That little promise is what killed Rome, I think.
Yeah, but can we? I mean, it's like, are you and I? What do we do? We're the only fucking adults. Do we let ourselves be governed by them?
No. We have to. Your next stage would be to get a bit crazier, and
I know what that laugh meant. I know where you were going with that laugh. I know where you were going with that laugh. I heard that. I heard what was going on in your head too.
What was that?
Crazier than you already are.
No, I mean you are, but you're correct. You're correct. You're a genius, obviously, but a little bit crazy to have. But that's the way your brain. You're a very useful tool, really. If you could be directed at anything, you've chosen this law, but it took you down these roads of all these other avenues of things you could deduce. It's
just standing on the shoulders of giants, really.
Well, I mean, yeah, but
it really is just standing.
You're quite fearless about it. The fearlessness is what helps, probably too. You don't.
Yes.
You don't care.
I'm very comfortable about disposing with my sacred cows, although I kind of want to keep my sacred cow that women are wonderful.
Yeah.
I want to keep that one because I think that one might throw me over the edge because I really
I don't have any problem with women at all. I don't, but you just have to say it like it is at certain times. even like say, with my wife, I'll say certain things, and she'll more or less agree as long as I say it a certain way, and it'll be fine. But
Yeah.
you can't just go around raving about this stuff all the time. You just have to.
Well, I don't. I
Yeah,
mean,
but
I
in the past.
love women, but I mean,
Oh, me too. Yeah.
you just can't give it left to their own devices in numbers. They're crazy.
Yeah, you definitely, yeah. And even like she explained to me how they work recently, a while ago. I said this on their podcast, I think, a while ago. But how was it? She was talking to some pals, and it was three girls talking. But one of the girls, she told me later on, had some kind of problem. I think she had a child with disability or something, and because of this, in their course of their conversation, this woman had sort of more power, and they had to look up to her and defer to her. So because of this disability, now that's something like men would never do. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That's very strange, and it's just how they work. That's it.
Well, they work by fear, actually. That's the thing. Once you realize it's all fear. Or even what they do when they say they're good is they're doing it to escape fear.
I know. I don't want to rant about women again. I've done it too many times.
Well, no, I don't. I don't either. And it's my cherished thing. Is like that's the one thing I don't want to have change.
Yeah, the good ones know that and they don't like to hear it. You just don't say it to them, but they have an idea of how things are. I don't know. We're at their mercy, overall in the society. But they're going to run it to the ground.
Anyway, your point was you've got to have fearlessness, and I don't have. I have an unhealthy pain tolerance and an unhealthy lack of fear, and certainly have I have a fairly healthy disregard for believing happy, nice thoughts that I depend on.
Well, I think I've drained as much out of you as I can for now. I still don't feel like I fully understand the entire thing. Like some of the things you would say in terms of the basis of the universe and the I'd have to.
Let me show you a picture real quick, and we'll end up. Okay.
All right.
Sure. All right. So here's a picture, right? Bubbles. That's actually what the quantum background looked like, but I try to get people to envision this, right?
Well, I can't see it, but
can you see this the picture?
Oh, hold on, I can add it. Hold on. Yeah, add to stream. Right, there we go. Yeah. Okay.
So, I was trying to get people to think of bubbles, and this is the quantum background. These spaces aren't really spaces. They're full of other things. So here's, I'm not going to walk you through the physics of it, right? But fundamentally, the universe is under pressure. The only way it can maintain state is to discover a stable relation, or it can collapse, right? So I end up with this shape. The only thing that you greater positive, greater negative, or stable relation.
Okay.
Then I show you how the brain is organized by sex differences between female empathizing and male systematizing, and I just represent it the same way because the difference is this is in time and this is across time. So you end up with building up, right? Consumption numbers now, capitalization quality later. So you end up with these fields. When you bring population coming into it, you see empathizing working here and systematizing working there. Turn it on its side, and we end up getting the same picture, but we've turned it on its side. Cooperation works in the same way. Unstable relations collapse, etc. So I'm just trying to point a picture of what these triangles mean. In here. Okay, so you can see all these triangles, right? There's millions of them.
Yeah.
Right. So you can probably understand something like this one, communism, so democratic socialism, state socialism.
Yeah.
You can probably see, and that all civilizations are distributed in the center somehow, right? But you can probably also see that that's one's too confusing for a quick understanding. But you can see that in general, a triangle works out as the three forces of coercion: female seduction, male force, and neutral exchange. And this is how we capture energy, by exchange. And so it won't, if I can get into every single measure there is.
That's quite In depth, yes.
right? I mean, there's just nothing to escape from it. It goes across everything. We go, and so the point is that I started out with this one. All right, this is the first model I came out with. Oops, that one's too small. I started out with this one.
Right.
And so I was trying to show how everything's reducible. And this is too much on one slide. And so, but it shows European tri-functionalism. And I was trying to show that, but I was trying to show how the different sex forces were applied, etc., how big the classes were, what our different priorities were. But so the guys went off and they broke this stuff into all these charts, right? But again, I only show this, right? I'm just showing you this very, very briefly to just say that when you're looking for something, you can use this triangle. You can use in other words, the simplified version if you want, and you can use this outer one. But in any event, all of this just expresses what's necessary for the universe to do to calculate increasing conversion of energy into mass. That's all. And it can only do it that way because it can't remember.
Okay, so that's the memory thing is like very hard just to grasp, just to casually drop in, like, so because it can't remember.
So you have a triangle, right? And close this off, right? I'm going to stop sharing.
I'll close that. Yeah.
So you have a triangle, right? It's no matter what you do, how you organize the points are going to have a triangle.
Okay.
So just rearrange the points in your head a million ways. You're always going to have a triangle. And the corners are always going to end up to 180 degrees.
Right.
No information external to the 3 points is necessary in order for you to describe a triangle.
Right.
Right. If you do that with any other piece of geometry, you have to store something else other than the 3 points.
Right.
Need knowledge.
Right.
All right. And so if you look at a video game, how are video games constructed? If you look at a wireframe of, I'm going to pick Skyrim because everybody knows it.
Yeah.
It's made of polygons. But is that true? No, it's made of triangles. For the same reason, it's the first geometry that is a stable relation without external information. I don't know how to simplify that anymore. If you're not getting it, I don't know how to simplify it anymore.
No, I understand that part, yeah. Right. But like in relation to memory, though, specifically, like, I don't know.
I mean, so if you have so in other words, you don't have a triangle is going to form no matter what you think with 3 points, right? But you have to think about making a square or an octagon, or you have to think about them and design it, and you have to plan it, right? The universe can't do that. Right. All the universe can do is try to organize a stable equilibrium between opposing forces that defeats entropy. That's all.
How does it even have that ability? That's beyond our ken.
Well, I mean, it's just because mechanically speaking, the way you get a positive negative is polarity, right? So you get increased energy into increased polarity. And a stable relation just means is the result of capturing that energy in a state. And so basically, if you can spin around fast enough, you can break contact with the background. In other words, you can break contact with the quantum background, so you can produce a particle or a wave, a protoparticle, or a particle.
Right.
It can persist. In other words, you've got enough energy that you can overcome drag.
So the universe producing us and us having memory is a way of it to produce further complication, maybe.
Yeah, that's the scary part. That's the part that says, okay, there is a God.
Well, there's also like, well, I mean, not just that, but like, say, if you have certain belief, I can only use the word belief, in the Big Bang Theory. What would you like? Do you ever dream about what was there before the Big Bang? You could try to conceive of nothing, or I know people have tried to describe this, but I never feel it's satisfactory.
Just because we don't know enough yet.
No, yeah, it's just unknowable. Yeah, is the thing.
Yeah, well, it might not forever be unknowable. I kind of doubt it, but it would. It's most likely that infinite time is a thing.
Infinite time.
Infinite time is a thing. Is the most likely one today. Which I think that's what people think. So in other words, the universe is infinite, even if it isn't. In other words, it's been around for infinity, right. Even if it isn't infinite in size. Right. I think the other one is that it's destroyed and recreated. So it's destroyed and recreated successfully, and the other one, of course, is that it's infinite and it's always bubbling. But it's pretty hard to imagine how right. you can't have something without you can't have nothing without something, just as much as you can't have something without nothing.
Yeah.
So we just don't know the answer. And so it's like my answer to God is I don't fucking know. I don't have to know. Right. I just have to know when somebody's lying to me about it, what they think it could be. I don't need to know about the universe yet. I think we'll figure it out. I just need to know when somebody's lying because they're claiming knowledge we don't have. So
that's one thing. That's one thing I got from Plato is the extreme difficulty of anybody making any kind of case for absolutism or claiming to know something absolutely, like you get with those fundamentalist guys. Like, no, that's wrong. Shut up. It's you've really got to like you work so hard to know every angle of things you try to say. That's what you got to do. That's what you learn from reading the Socratic dialogue or whatever. Like how the problem of relativism.
Yeah, I don't mean to shit on Plato, by the way. I don't mean that. I'm specifically criticizing a specific abuse of the idea, which is to create what we call a fictionalism.
Oh yeah, I know that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I'm not shitting.
That's the same as Aristotle, and Aristotle was actually a Platonist, just a rebel Platonist.
Everybody tells me, well, Curt, it's really Epicurus you should use because he was right and Aristotle was wrong. I'm like, well, great, but the symbol of empiricism versus literary, empirical versus literary thought is the one that the whole fucking Western civilization compares is the dispute between Aristotle and Plato.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's the whole thing. I was like, I'm not going to, I fight enough verbal battles as it is. Right. I mean, when I say mathematical Platonism, people know what that means. When I say Aristotelian realism, people know what that means, or Aristotelian empiricism, they know this. It doesn't matter if Aristotle was more wrong than Epicurus. Right. I mean, Epicurus was more right than Aristotle. So.
Yeah. Well, I think I've picked your brain about that enough now. That's.
I wish I'd had a chance to go through the triangles with you. You would have liked it, but another time.
Oh, you mean you haven't done it yet? What?
I think we should, at some point, go through the triangles. I think you'd find it fun.
Go through the triangles? How do you mean? Like?
We'll go through. We'll walk through.
Like from your diagram thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
You don't need to, but it's
no, I will, yeah. No, sure. I would. Yeah, that'd be good. I'd have to really study it then. I'd have to be a different setup here where I could stare at the screen while I'm talking. I'm a bit far away from the computer here. Because I could do that. I don't have to use this camera over here. I've got kind of a weird setup here. Yeah, sure, we can do that.
So you're in Ireland.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Now, how did you end up in Ireland?
I came here on a working holiday, and I accidentally got married. So I left on a holiday, and I never again went home.
Is your wife around?
She's inside there. Yeah. Why, you want me to get her?
Well, I want to hear the story of how you met from her.
How I met her? Oh, I just was out and I met her
Oh no, but I can start something, I'm sure.
What do you want to start?
Some start. Just make everybody laugh. I love your outfit, by the way.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing you need. You need to get more spooky and mystical. And then you'll
so you
rational mysticism. You're a rational mystic. That's what you
Okay. I don't want here's what I'm really asking. Is it expensive to live there or not?
Yes. But since I left Canada, it certainly got a lot more expensive to live there as well.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how they compare. I know over the years since I've been here, I used to go back and I just noticed it gradually caught up, and I don't know how to compare other places anymore. Every place seems so screwed and
Yeah.
failing. But it's expensive.
I rode horses on the west coast of Ireland once.
Did you?
It was
like around
it was spiritual.
Was it the Aran Islands or one of these things? Or
no, it's just right along the coast there. I don't know if you can do it anymore, but back in the 80s you could.
Well, I've ridden horses around here, but we're not on the West Coast. But...
All right, brother. Thanks for spending the time with me. I love you, man.
Yeah, I love you too, platonically. And, thanks for that, Curt. I'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye.